Stewart Gandolf today. We are on another interview today and we are now talking to a colleague that I've done a lot of these kinds of things in the past. Aaron and I first met back when he was working with Binary Fountain, and we ended up doing a COVID series, or during COVID, a webinar series. I don't know how many we did. We did a bunch, at least
Yeah,
half a dozen, maybe
like
more.
yeah, seems like
And those were among our very best attended webinars ever. And I think we both had a lot of fun doing that, even though we were in sort of a worldwide pandemic. But anyway, Aaron has moved around a little bit since then, and he now is the VP of Consumer Experience with Press Ganey. So, first of all, welcome back to the recording sphere with me here, Aaron.
yeah, great to be on and having a session with you again, Stuart. We, like you said, we had a lot of great sessions and they were well attended.
So today we're talking about Press Ganey's CX Trends report, and there's a lot of insights. And as you know, Aaron, I love geeking out on consumer trends, and I think that's a mutual passion for both of us. And I guess let's start before we talk about the report. Just tell a little people about tell people about your background to get a sense of what your focus has been in recent years and what you're doing these days at Press Ganey.
Sure. Well, I had a long tenure at a health system here in Nashville. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, HCA Healthcare, and was there for 15 years, had a number of different roles, but majority of that time was spent in the digital space and having the website, digital strategy, and the consumer insights groups. And so I created the consumer experience department there. We didn't call it that. It was just reputation and listings management, kind of the reputation management team. And in addition to having all the other responsibilities for websites and digital tools on the website. And that really took me into an area of learning and, of course, implementing listings management and reputation across an enterprise as large as HCA gave me a unique perspective and a unique experience working with my team that kind of led for me to go into Binary Fountain, which was our vendor at the time for the consumer experience space. I left healthcare for a little bit and I went to Dollar General corporate. And so that gave me a unique perspective of the consumer. And but I was missing healthcare. And about that time, Press Ganey reached out and I came back as the VP of Consumer Experience and having a great time.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about the purpose. So this is a unique CX Trends report, I think. So let's talk about just the broad characterization of what it was about this time.
Sure. So we wanted to get in, knowing that the evolution and the advent of AI tools being in the hands of consumers, we wanted to see the impact that it was having and is having on the healthcare journey. So we've had for a number of years, we've put out an annual CX trends report, and that would give us insights on how consumers are choosing, what's important to them, how they feel about reviews, what sites they're using to research providers. And we continue to do that because we think it's very important. But we wanted, this is unique in that we implemented and introduced how the Geminis and the ChatGPTs and others are being used to research care, find care, and then how consumers feel about even their providers using AI in a setting. So we kind of collected all of that information. And then we also, knowing that wait time and scheduling is a real challenge in different parts of our country, as far as seeing a primary care physician, we wanted to get insights into, well, how long are you willing to wait and what's appropriate? And so those are kind of a nuance and some new things that we introduced into this study.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk first of all about uh, the insights that were revealed regarding finding care when they're searching for a provider. What kinds of things were you able to find there?
Yeah, so we are, first I'll say that just for baseline and for information, we surveyed over 1,000 individuals and consumers. And so that was kind of the pretty broad and across all the areas of our country. So it was a domestic, not international, it was a domestic uh, study. So in terms of how consumers are finding care, Google is still number one. It is still like 60% the consumers start with and trust Google results. So that brings into question, of course, accuracy and that you're well represented on Google. It's still important, although I would say the playing field is being leveled by the the AI tools like ChatGPT. It's people are turning to it more, not as much right now. So we'll still see, but Google is still consumers' first trusted source, like when starting and referring and searching. And that is just, going to be there, I think, for the next few years. It's not going to be less important. You're just going to have to be more aware of what's happening on all the other third-party sites because even Google is with their AI mode, they're profiling more third-party sites as well, like Healthgrades and WebMD, and even Yelp is getting in there too. So you're going to have to be more aware. And then I've seen this journey the last 15 years that have been involved in the consumer space in healthcare is that we cared about Google a lot. And then we are like, oh man, we cared about the third party sites because those were ranking higher. And then Google introduced the map pack and we're profiling its properties more. And so we cared more about it. And then your own brand, first party, always worry about it. But we were, it's just kind of gone through a cycle. So it seems like we're on a cycle of now of like, you have to be aware of everywhere, everything, everywhere, all at once. It's the movie title. You kind of have to be that way now. And that's what our research is showing.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Aaron. We've tracked this, of course, and we've done other podcasts and webinars on this topic with AI and search. And what we're seeing is the market share is still, at least in terms of using ChatGPT, for example, and others versus Google, it's still overwhelmingly Google. So the 60% you're talking about is comparing all sources, not just online sources. So we're still seeing that, but we are seeing it growing. And of course, the large language model tools are growing really, really fast in usage and ways people are using them. And like anything else, my experience, I remember sitting down in, undergraduate marketing class years ago, learning about the diffusion of innovations, where you have sort of the innovators and early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, that whole model. And that's what we're seeing today. There are people that are just eating it up, using it for everything, and others are still using Google mostly. They haven't even really tried it, but definitely the trends are there for sure. It's interesting too, Aaron, and we'll see how this evolves. We get inquiries every day about, from our agency because we've done a lot of SEO and a lot of thought leadership over the years, of course. So we get inquiries daily. But what I'm noticing is we've had a couple recently that are really good, straight in our sweet spot. And I like to ask, how'd you find us? And both of these two really good ones did say they found us through ChatGPT. So I thought that was really intriguing. So that's a whole other topic for another day about how to show up for
Mhm.
ChatGPT and the LLMs. But it is interesting and it's definitely changing. So let's talk about the rating side of this. So actually going back to the finding doctors, you mentioned the vast majority are still finding Google. What are some of the other common sources your survey shows, in addition to Google and LLMs?
Well, of course, the third party sites, as far as making a decision, very important. Insurance websites rank up there pretty high. It was number three. So, as far as in when relying on who you rely on the most for referral or when selecting a primary care provider, for example, it will be other providers that there's a high trust. So this is like kind of offline, right? But then right behind it. So that was like at 60% referral from an existing health provider. And this is around primary care specifically, but kind of paints the picture for other specialties as well. And then 59% was online search. And then the third one was the insurance website. And sometimes as marketers, we forget about the insurance website. And
Right.
you're like, well, they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to get the information. But I do encourage an audit of your providers, of your health system and a provider system. Uh, Go look at the United, directory and see if your providers are well represented on those sites. And then take action. If not, whether it's photography, whether it's the phone number, or other metadata around that particular listing, for sure pay attention to that. And then there's of course, review sites, the healthcare provider sites. There's Rate MDs, of course, and Health Grades, and um, a number of them, Vitals in as well. And then other, of course, the referral, but referral, it used to be referral in person. Referral was like number one. And it's interesting to see over time that kind of go down, because we'll trust more from our research online or from AI as well. And of course, advertisement, it showed up and like at 28%. And then at 26% are AI tools. And that's what was surprising, because we're only like a couple of years, right? At the end of 2022, as ChatGPT came on, and just the LLMs are maturing and just gaining usage. And so we expect that number to be a lot higher. They're being used a lot for research, of course, of conditions and treatments, but also to book and find care is we're seeing. In fact, one stat I'll share with you, just in terms of 36% of the consumers who responded to our study are already using generative AI for healthcare purposes. So of that, like 43% was around the researching of conditions. And then next was exploring treatments, but 31% was scheduling appointments. So actually going in and asking, are there appointments? How do I schedule an appointment? And so that tells me as a marketer, like, one, I need to ensure that it is clear as day on my first party website, on my health system provider website, that it is clear of how to make an appointment. And we know most appointments are still happening over the phone. Us digital guys and in marketing, like we like to, yeah, we like to like, no, it's all digital, it's all book online. But we know that online appointments are they're still difficult, right? Because there's a lot happening there, whether it's the technology itself or if it's the scheduling patterns and habits within a provider system. We know that it's a challenge. So a lot of people are still picking up the phone. But
Yep.
make it clear. Make sure that it's accurate information where it's extremely clear to the consumer. I know this sounds like we're preaching this 10, 15 years ago, but it's never been more important. And we find every day systems that may not have the rigor or the discipline or the technology or partners to help them with it, that it's not accurate. And doing an audit, you discover a lot of inaccuracy. So that's just more troublesome to the consumer, to the patient, and we need to do our best to avoid that.
So, it's funny, the whole online scheduling part of that, we can just talk about that for a second. It's getting better, but it's still really hard depending on the providers. So there are providers that recognize it for what it is. And our agency works with both, hospitals, health systems, but also multi-location providers. And on a lot of these multi-location providers, they're PE backed, they have more of a business acumen, and they find a way to make the online scheduling work. And they, especially when they figure out it's a competitive advantage. And in some dentists, in some areas of professions and specialties like dentistries, it's becoming table stakes because
Yeah.
if you don't offer it and other people do, then you're going to win, and or vice versa. I mean, if you don't offer it and the other people do, you're going to lose. So it's been something that you've complained about, I've complained about. My friend Rob Klein, who speaks a lot on this topic, these kinds of topics, we've been saying, why can I book on Open Table, but I can't book with a doctor? Why does it have to be so hard? And it's
Yeah.
still hard, depending, because of, you mentioned the technology changes, and also internal policies. And I understand why those policies are all there, but it just makes it exceedingly frustrating for the consumer. And I find it really interesting that people are asking how to book an appointment. It should be so obvious. On the rating side of this, what did you learn about we talked about choosing a doctor, and then let's talk about the rating side of it. How is that changing with the advent of LLMs, and where do you see that going?
Well, one thing that we saw, and I'll just mention this part and then go to the LLMs, is as far as how consumers or what percentage of consumers are using reviews to make a decision. Saw that 30% of consumers always read reviews, and then another 32% do so frequently. So that's 64% are caring about the online ratings. And some of the red flags that the consumers are looking for when it comes to reviews are 45% are looking for that quality, poor quality reviews impacts. Like if they're uncertain and there's, just a lot of negative or a lot of ambiguity, like not great. Consumers are going to go somewhere else, just like you would for a product or even a restaurant. But it applies in healthcare as well. If there's not enough reviews, that's going to be a red flag. So if there's a small number now, we're used to seeing in all other segments that we interact with, whether we go to Amazon or whether we even go to a hotel brand, right? We're looking at first party reviews and third party reviews. But you're the red flag if there's not enough reviews.
Yeah.
And then star ratings under 3.7 star rating. So if you have less than a 3.7, going to be concerned there, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe not enough reviews, 19% said not enough reviews on third-party sites. So it's one thing to have, and we are well versed at this, and we help organizations around getting their first-party survey, their med practice survey results to be on their website for first-party reviews. And that's a very reputable, it's kind of verified buyer status kind of approach, right? But then if you see 100 reviews on the provider website, but then you go over to HealthGrades, you only see 3, there's some distrust there. Like, what's going on here?
Uh,
So ensuring that those are needed. What we're seeing from an AI overview, and you may have experienced this too, just in searching for a provider, is it is, find me a primary care physician in Nashville that is rated highly, those type of um, prompt engineering that's happening. And we can't capture all, and we don't understand all of what the consumers are entering into the AI chat from a prompt engineering standpoint. But these things are going to be important. So they're just showing up and they're providing links and sources to where the reviews are, and they're pulling in the third party reviews. So we're extremely bullish in terms of like, you've got to own your third party reviews and take action on it to ensure that you're well represented on those third party sites.
So it's so interesting how, like sometimes I feel like, because I'm a heavy user of ChatGPT and also I have a premium Perplexity account, so I'm using LLMs all the time
Cool.
now. And but sometimes it's spot on and it's fantastic. Other times, like, really? That's like we had to ask
Right.
last weekend, places in Orange County with great patios and for lunch. And like we know each of those restaurants, like that was a big miss. So it's still a machine, right? And it's trying to go by reviews and other sources and try to pull it together. But it's going to get better and better. And I think that's the key in
Yeah,
optimizing
right.
around that for sure. Um, you mentioned so we'll see how that evolves, but clearly, choosing doctors, reviewing doctors, that's going to be something that we think a lot about. And again, we've covered that topic on other podcasts and on
Mm.
other webinars of how to do that. And for those of you that are listening on this time, just the short answer is all the good stuff you do for Google helps a lot with reviews and or helps a lot with the LLMs, the large language models. So um, the let's talk about another topic which you alluded to in the opening, and I'm not sure. Tell me how much you guys covered this, but and because this is evolving so fast, I'm guessing that your CX report is going to be out of date really fast because things are
Yeah,
just
right.
changing. But my wife just got her blood test back from her annual physical, and she threw it in a chat GPT. And she was like, I love this. This is amazing. It was telling her everything. And she got like not just results of um, what each of these measures meant, but at the end it said, whatever you're doing, your doctor must be proud of you. If it's exercise and diet that's making these numbers look so good, keep it up. So she felt like I never get comments like that from my doctor. So that's a
Huh.
big leap, right? That they're using it. Did you guys cover the idea of patients, asking about either specific results or more just about their condition or treatment? Like what kinds of things did you learn so far from your report?
Yeah, great question. Well, we wanted to understand definitely, who's using it and what are they using it for. So as I mentioned a little earlier, as far as in the 36% of consumers using it for health-related research. So that research conditions and explore treatments were definitely, 43 and 42% respectively. And so the component is what we asked as well is how comfortable are you using AI with each generation? So, obviously you have the baby boomers and up, and they were less comfortable using it. Um, Obviously, the comfort rose as you go to the younger generations, where 47% Gen X and 61% millennials. But then we asked, like, where are you comfortable with your doctor using AI? And so nearly one third of consumers would feel uncomfortable if they learned the doctor's communication was generated by AI, which I thought was interesting, just attitudes like, hey, like, I'm a little uncomfortable, but that's interesting. It's one third means two thirds were comfortable, right? But 75% of consumers expected to be notified when AI was used in healthcare communications. So transparency is key. They want to know when it's being used and how is it being used. And so I think it's important from a uh, practice and care provider perspective and I had this recently just myself, like, hey, I have my provider said, I have ambient listening. It's going to be taking notes. We want to ensure accuracy. Are you comfortable with that? And I'm like, yeah, thank you for asking. It's I really appreciate it. And they had
So
learned from their research because I asked a little bit
yeah,
compared to
well,
the research.
so it's interesting. Again, going through this as a consumer, my wife and I both have had doctor's appointments for, fortunately, small things. And both of us were asked, is it okay if we're using AI? And I went to see like my allergist, for example, because I just have chronic allergies, drives me nuts. And I'm like, sure, please. And I feel like it'd be interesting to see how this evolves over time. I can imagine that, older, citizens or maybe less educated or more educated, depending on the case, may be more fearful of AI. But for me, it's like, look, I'm using Fathom today to record this podcast. My writer will use that as a start to um, summarizing the podcast for us. Like it just makes sense. It's crazy not to. And when I use, and we've talked about this on other podcasts, Fathom for meetings, the stuff that I miss is amazing. So of course, doctors are human. Like this is a positive thing. And
Absolutely.
so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time because, in fact, when I said, sure, go ahead and use AI, my doctor said to me with a sigh of relief, oh, thank you. So it's obviously already much easier for them when they can rely on the AI and much more difficult. And if a third are objecting, it certainly is their right. It'll be interesting to see over time if that becomes less and less a concern. They just get used to it. It's everywhere. I'm guessing so, like where it becomes sort of like how you interact with life. But in the meantime, we do have to respect people's wishes and privacy, and that makes sense. I have another question. I don't know if you guys covered this or not. I'm curious because I read the report, but it's been a while. Um, two of the things that are really exciting for me about AI in healthcare, one is more obscure, consumers really wouldn't notice, but in call tracking platforms now are able to take calls and analyze the inquiry of the call to be able to decide if was the call handled properly? Did they result in an appointment? The thing about call tracking is, and we always say this call may be recorded for HIPAA, and HIPAA and quality assurance. So just lest anybody freak out, we always say that at the very beginning of the call with the technology to remain compliant and ethical. But anyway, nobody ever listens to those calls. Nobody goes and picks thousands of calls, but AI can summarize that. So that's a big deal. And then secondly, another technological developments happening already in multiple fields is having AI agents to actually interact like it's a human with people. And it's funny, I've had some say that the companies we talk to recommend disclosing it's an AI agent. Others are like it's not a big deal. Clearly, it just sounds like consumers, care, want to know when they're dealing with AI. But did you guys survey any of these kinds of topics? Or I think just broadly, we do know they want to, if they want to be disclosed, we need to at least do that.
Yeah, we didn't to the contact center and those specific items. This year, when we do the study later this fall, we're going to dive in a little bit more into those details. As the proliferation of those tools are being used, we definitely want to understand consumers' feeling about it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I want to go back to just in terms of while we're still on AI, which we can have a whole episode more to talk about, which I hope you have me back. But I
Yeah.
think that the component of as providers adopt these tools and as they're enabling them to do more, we know they're already crunched for time. And so I was just talking to my provider. I'm like, well, what do you think about it? He's like, this has saved me so much time. I think it's going to have a direct impact on online scheduling. You go, well, how? How do these two go together? I think in terms of the time blocks that providers have made on their scheduling, it's going to allow them to see more patients and provide better care and more attention on, and because it's relieving the administrative burden. And so I do think that we'll continue to hopefully inch our way to, we'll never be 100% online scheduling, I don't think, I think we'll be using the phones for a long time. And so don't abandon your calls center, invest in it, if anything, make it an amazing experience, if anything. But I do think that we're going to see more availability online from a scheduling standpoint. And I hope that the providers need some relief any way they can get it. So
When I talk to people outside of healthcare, most people that I talk to, and I don't know what your data shows, really are no clue about like they assume, doctors are, getting richer and COVID made the hospitals rich and, they assume that, that everybody's getting screwed somehow and they don't really know that the hospitals are actually most of them lost money during COVID and the impact. But the one thing that's people are kind of beginning to get a sense of is access, and but I don't think they still get really how impacted access is. And so when people that are in healthcare talk about using PAs and NPs to help expand the coverage with medical doctors, which clearly we're seeing more and more of, and we'll continue to see more and more of. But AI is another way to relieve pressure on the access problem, right? The more efficient a doctor becomes, the more they're the director of the play, not doing every single part, the more efficient it's going to be. And then you start getting to things like reviewing lab results or scans, and trying to get to the meat of the matter really quickly, and still using your brain to double check. But man, it's a lot faster if you can use tools to get right. So I think that's really part of the solution for access and the limited number of doctors with an expanding, aging, older population.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
you did a couple more things before we wrap up for the day. You mentioned that you did look at, how long consumers are willing to wait. What did you find, for an appointment? What kinds of things did you find there? And do you find that changing over time?
Yeah, it's here in Nashville, this was when we were seeing it just with a number of our partners and the availability and access while we're on access. So the scheduling here in Nashville, for example, just to get in to see a primary care physician, there's about a 9-month waiting period.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
is
it's like it is. I've tried, and it is nearly impossible. Like you almost have to know somebody to get in and have a secret passcode, the secret handshake feels like. And so we wanted to understand, like, where are you willing to wait and for how long? And so, a high percentage is still not a high percentage, but just the example, less than a week was 25% ish for a primary care. So the expectations are still high. Um, and then for specialty care, a little less. Like not every majority of people, they don't believe they can get into a specialist with less than a week. Um, but in terms of like most people, and like 50, not most, but 50% and a little less than that, where 1 to 3 weeks was reasonable. The willingness to wait past 3 months, where 1 to 3 months is lower in that 30% range or 20% range. And then even less for 4 to 6 months. But so 49% of consumers will wait 1 to 3 weeks for an appointment before they're just like, what's happening? But 30% of when it comes to specialties, 30% are willing to hold off for 1 to 3 months. So,
Yeah.
and we've trained the consumer with that, right? Like we've trained, we've conditioned them. Our expectations have been set. But with the shortage of I heard this stat 13, 14 years ago that in 10 to 12 years, we're going to have a physician shortage, a family physician shortage. And I'm like, because at that time I was marketing to get more patients because we had vacancies. So I was,
Right.
patients, you were too, I'm sure, working with. And now it's like, whoa, we don't have capacity. So there's some of the shifting of the initiatives have turned to specialties and then overall brand. And then
Yeah.
we didn't hit on overall brand because we did want to understand that. And of course, because brand just being such a big thing. So online reviews for providers and everything else, but then the reputation of the brand in general, I think is extremely important from an access standpoint. And why I say from an access standpoint is what we asked for, because we know that in the absence of being able to get an appointment, many people turn to the urgent cares or even freestanding ERs. And so we are wanting to understand, well, how does that impact, from a um, who will you choose? Because there's all kinds of different brands in the urgent care space, and many of them are owned by a health system, but they're not co-branded. Some of them are, some of them are, some of them are just standalone and affiliation. But we found like 64% were more comfortable with having going to an urgent care that was affiliated with a health system. So, what we're seeing is brand for overall systems are um, so important,
Yeah.
to understand not only from an online reputation standpoint, but then broader into a market study of knowing how aware are they of your brand, and then what's their preference for your brand. And then if you have your access point strategy and it includes urgent cares, how are they branded? Should you be thinking about other strategies with how it's branded and maybe aligning it more with your system? So just some other interesting insights and tidbits that I think some of your listeners would be interested in understanding.
So, yeah, for sure. So, couple comments before I ask you the last question. One is we will be, if you're listening to this on a streaming service, you found us through iTunes or Pandora or wherever, or through YouTube. If you go to the healthcaresuccess.com website, find the search bar and search for this episode, you'll find the Press Ganey report attached. So you can look at it that way, or of course, you can just Google Press Ganey CX Trends Report and find it that way. So, but for your convenience, it'll be on our website as well. So the data you can get the actual raw data. Secondly, I wish we had time. We could talk about this one topic forever. Urgent care. We work with multiple urgent care chains, and in fact, I'm going to be going to the Evolve Urgent Care Association meeting in a couple weeks in Dallas, so I'll be
Oh, cool.
there. So it's a big part of our business. And I think urgent care just has become such a, risen to become the first line of defense in so many cases. Back in the old days when I was sick, we would call our primary care doctor and sit there. Now we don't even consider that. They can't see us, they don't have time, and it's not convenient for me either. And I think I'm, comparable to about 90% of the population at least, right? It's just that so they're whether they want to by design or not, we're giving away those kinds of routine visits or, sick visits to urgent care. And a lot of people, you said a moment ago, can't get into primary care. They think their urgent care is their primary care, which is a whole different issue, right? So there's a lot there. And by the way, knowing how Nashville has grown so explosively, that access, that on a local level was obviously unknown to me, but I guess in retrospect, not that surprising because, Nashville's just so explosively grown over the years. So the last question is, and we don't have time to do this justice today, but where do you think this is going to go the next 10 to 15 years with AI going back to large language models? I mean, it's really hard to predict because it's already surprised us. But
Right.
any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that the what doesn't change is the need for quality content, first party, care for your own website, and then always be aware of the third party. So good content and ensuring just accuracy, that doesn't change because that's going to be consistently feeding the LLMs. Obviously, how generations interact and expectations of what they can get done will be changing because of how fast we can get certain tasks done using AI. So I think with the advent and the advancement of agents being used and individuals having their own personal agents and go do this on my behalf um, is definitely going to come into play, and how that interacts with health systems and providers and what they need to be aware of, oh, Aaron, his little agent, of responding to either scheduling and picking up the phone and answering for me and being able to manage my schedule. We're going to see that. So it's going to go both ways, right? Individuals will have agents and they're going to be interacting on our behalf. And so there'll be new strategies that we have to employ for those scenarios. And I think that's sooner rather than later. But then also just in, how we make choices will continue to evolve, and our dependency on, I think there's going to be a lot more dependency of how we use these ChatGPTs and Gemini and Claude and Perplexity and these others that are just going to be, it's too hard to predict. So
Yeah.
I'm a little safe because I don't know what I don't know. And I'm constantly blown away by new tech and like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. So I'm not
Yeah.
adventurous, but I just, it's pretty exciting time to be alive.
I think that the one thing that I notice is on anything that's a sort of a rote task that, oh, I don't really want to do that, that like requires creativity. So, for example, we're writing a case study about actually success in urgent care. And one of my salespeople wanted to have like sort of a bullet point email. And so it's like, well, I could do that as a quick AI um, place to start. And it was really good. It was 80% of the way there. I just had to tweak it. So I don't, not giving my brain up to AI, at least not willingly and not knowingly at this
Right.
point.
Yeah,
But I
no,
do
please.
worry about people becoming so reliant, creativity gets stifled, and thinking and critical thinking becomes stifled because when it's right, let's pretend we get to a point where AI is right almost always, then it's not, but it's still not always. And so if you're not looking, you're in trouble. The best metaphor that just occurred to me is I remember a story about somebody who lived in a country road, and there was never anybody in that road. Never, never, never. And so eventually they just quit looking left when they turned out into the street, and then boom, they got killed. Because there's never anybody coming, right? So it's like,
Right.
not to be too morbid, but like if you over rely and you give up your critical thinking, you get into trouble, even if it's rare. So that's a positive thought to end our interview. We'll have to pick
Yeah,
follow up
that's
on.
great, Stuart. Appreciate
Yeah, thanks. I'm
it.
depressed, like just rocking in the corner in depression. But anyway, Aaron, it was fun as always.
Yeah, thank you.
We will put the report on our website. You're always welcome back. And by the way, I don't know if you even know this. I've interviewed lots of people from Press Ganey over the years. My friend Dr. Jim Merlino, Tom Lee, lots of people. But it's like so fun to have you back on this meeting. And we love the research you guys do, the work you guys do. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Stuart. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take
All
care,
right,
everyone.
take care.
Bye.